Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. We'll be diving right into our newspaper review. And first off, we have a Daily Trust. Right in front, Iran, protests in Lagos, Sokoto, Gombe and others. That's continued on pages 3 and 4 of Daily Trust. At the top left, we have petrol price may hit 1,000 naira as Middle East crisis escalates. That's on page 24 if you want more. Protest in Nasarawa over poor power supply. That's on page 8. Alleged wiretapping, family defends El Rafai. That's on page 5 of the Daily Trust. At the bottom, we have Umrah suffers setback as airlines suspend flights to Saudi Arabia. That's on page 10 of the Daily Trust. Vigilante, wife and 12 others abducted in Kaduna. That's on page 31 if you want more details. Police Council confirms Disu as IGP. That's on page 8 of the Daily Trust. Last but not the least, 5.5 billion naira Kano Skills Center grounded. That's on page 27 if you want more. All right, joining us to review some of the headlines of the pages of our national dailies is Programs Director, Daily Trust Foundation, Dr. Theophilus Abba. But before we come to him, we'll be taking another newspaper. All right, we have a Guardian next up, right in front of the Guardian newspaper. Drug shortage funding cuts put 100 million Nigerians NTD gains at risk. That's on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper. At the top left, we have NNPCL loses power to collect 30% PSCs as E09 takes off. That's on page 4 of the Guardian. Services disrupted as UCH unions begin 5-day strike over power rationing. That's on page 7. El Rafai's family replies ICPC on wiretapping secret documents. That's on page 4 of the Guardian. DSS arrests suspect behind Obi Oyegun's assassination attempt. That's on page 20 if you want more. Middle East war sends crude higher, fuels fresh inflation risk in Nigeria. That is on page 6 of the Guardian. We have Nigeria's net reserves rise by 7.72% in 2 years to $34.8 billion. That's on page 15 of the Guardian newspaper. That's all we can take on the Guardian. Make sure you grab yourself a copy and stay informed. Now with us right here in the studio is Dr. Theophilus Abba, Programs Director, Daily Trust Foundation. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you and good morning.
All right, let's start with Daily Trust. Right in front, we have Iran protests in Lagos, Sokoto, Gombe, and others. Now, a couple of states are the protesting in. We have Kano, we have Kaduna, we have Bauchi, we have Yobe as well. Now, these are a lot of states where the members of the Islamic movement in Nigeria, popularly known as the Shiites, are protesting due to the conflict that's happening between the United States and Israel and Iran, as well as the killing of Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. I'd like to hear your take on this.
Well, what's happening in the middle is quite unfortunate. Let me start by saying that because, every other day you hear about killings, war, just the Gaza war. I don't think it has totally ended, but at least has subsided. We had the one in Lebanon. Then we are hearing that of Iran. Iraq is already, I think there's a fatigue now in Iraq. There's a little of that. Then there was Syria, I know this, I know that. Incidentally, we expected the protests, across the country by the Shiites, because historically, any time there was this crisis, the relevant religious groups in Nigeria will protest. I remember when I was an undergraduate, when there was when Iraq invaded Kuwait, we're running up and down because there was tension in Kano, so that was a long time ago. So historically, we know that when these things happen, there's always that reverberation in Nigeria. It's not unexpected, and I think security agencies have also talked about ensuring that they maintain peace, there's no violence. Protest is not in itself bad, because you are saying you don't like what is happening. What we are praying that it should not resort to violence in Nigeria. And we have to be clear-headed about what's happening in the Middle East. It's actually a geopolitical struggle. Israel wants to have its way in the Middle East. Iran also wants to have its way in the Middle East. So you see there's that struggle, the geopolitical struggle. Then as far as America is concerned, America is about its own economic interest. They want the flow of oil from the Middle East to America. That's why they have their military bases all over in the Middle East, most of the countries, to ensure that nothing threatens the flow of oil, to the Middle East. And you look at Iran, Iran also wants to exert its own influence. So it has supporters, those that support in Lebanon, in Israel, in Syria, in different regions, in Yemen, in that area. So it's just a struggle among themselves, and this struggle is becoming quite deadly. So none of them is thinking about Nigerians. That's what I'm talking about. That's what none of them, they're not thinking about us. They're thinking about their own interests. Even the countries, the Middle East countries, if you look at it, Saudi Arabia, if you talk of Qatar, Doha, all of them, the military bases there are not really because they like Americans, because they want to protect themselves against attack from whoever they call their enemy. So all these things that are happening, well, it's not good, but then in Nigeria, if we are taking any action, we should know that they are not thinking about us. It's not for our own good. It's for their own selfish interest.
Now, speaking about Nigeria and oil, as you mentioned, now, according to reports, petrol price may hit 1,000 naira as Middle East crisis escalates. Now, with these reports, they projected to increase to 1,072 naira a litre as the conflict in the Middle East could push prices of crude oil to $100 per barrel. Well, I'd like to hear your take on that.
Well, this is the time that we expect, the government to defend the oil price. What do I mean by that? We produce crude oil in Nigeria, and now it's really difficult to even export because, the high seas where this crude oil are transported is also being affected by this war. So I was thinking that if the NNPC refineries were working, and if Dangote refineries can mop up a lot of excess crude oil, then we should produce a lot for Nigerians to use and reduce import. So because we are not supposed to be, from what I know, we shouldn't be importing crude oil. It's only when you import crude oil that the prices has to jack up. I don't know whether OPEC has increased the cost, the cost per barrel. But I'm thinking that if we produce crude oil in Nigeria, we can determine that, this is a crisis period. Even this oil that we have, we will not be able to sell, at the rate which we expected to sell. And so let's refine this oil and sell to Nigerians at affordable prices. 1,070 naira per litre is quite high. For those of us who buy fuel every day, it's a very high cost. I know the whole world will feel the impact of this war from the perspective of the oil, increase the price of oil. But if we have crude oil, we should find a way of ensuring that Nigerians are not exposed to this high cost. I don't know the economics of it. I don't know the strategies that can be put in place. But I'm thinking that if you say, okay, with this crude oil that we are exporting may not, will not get this money because of the blockade of the channel of transportation. Now, why don't we refine as much and make it, and maintain at least the current price at about 800 or even 900. Let's maintain it in Nigeria, because there's no wisdom in just paying the international price when you are producing locally.
No.
If you look at it from the perspective of a farmer, you have, harvested your yam, it's not being sold. And it's okay, you are going to sell it to yourself, at a very high cost. It shouldn't be so. Maybe I'm too simplistic about it. But I think there should be a way of intervening so that the price of of oil does not rise too high for Nigerians.
All right. Now, let's look at this back and forth that's been going on. The alleged wiretapping, Family Defense Rufai. We've heard from the ICPC that they found a device or an equipment that is capable of tapping conversations from the residence of the former governor. Now, in his defense, his wife and his son are out saying nothing of such was found in the residence, and the wife saying that she was there while the search was going on. And according to his son, the entire foundation of the investigation is rotten, and the search that purportedly uncovered these phantom items originated from a legally defective warrant. I'd like to hear your take on it.
Well, if you look at the sequence of events, that led to whatever we are facing today, it started with, His Excellency, the former governor of Kaduna State, saying, somebody listening to the conversation of so and so person, and they revealed that that was said. You understand? And if you look at the Cybercrime Prevention Act, that is a crime. That's a crime. Going to eavesdrop, on communications, tapping into the communication of another Nigerian
especially the national security advisor.
Yes, it's a criminal act. Now, but the thing is that if ICPC has enough evidence, then that evidence has to be presented at the court of law. Because what we say, what his wife says, what his son says, it's just for us, the ordinary Nigerians, to consume. By the time you get to the court of law, the court will say, okay, ICPC, where is your evidence? And they'll scrutinize the evidence. They will have to scrutinize the evidence. And there's a whole lot of work to be done to provide the evidence. If you say, okay, he had this, you saw this, you bring an expert who can examine it to know whether it is actually an equipment that can be used in wiretapping. That is one. Then you have to even prove further, how did he acquire this? Who are the manufacturers of this? You now have to find out, how did he get it from this manufacturer? It's a whole lot of work that ICPC needs to do, to prove it. So I would say that, if I belong to that family, one of the things I would say, let's work with our lawyers to prove that what the ICPC got is not what it is. That is the challenge they have now. But as far as ICPC is concerned, it has a whole lot of work to do to prove to the judge that, look, this is an equipment that ought not to be used under the Cybercrime Prevention Act. So it's a whole lot of war, but we're expecting that the judges, they should do the right thing.
All right. Let's look at this. Police Council confirms Disu as IGP. I'd like to hear your take on this, his confirmation, and what we might expect from the new IGP.
Well, I think it's given that if the president has nominated a new IGP, an acting IGP, unless the police council has anything against him, maybe he was involved in something that are untoward, they will say, no, we are not going to confirm your appointment. And I know that even before the appointment, there must have been background checks, to find out who this guy is, what has he been doing, has he been doing these things well, and things like that. So the president will not want to go and present to the council somebody that will be thrown out to say, no, this guy is not worth it. So I know from some of the readings that we have done, he has held strategic positions, very, very strategic positions. And if I were going to ask, if I had the opportunity to see him and ask him a question, I'll find out from him why the technology that used to track bandits who were collecting ransoms, is no longer effective. Because I know when this Abba Kyari, was heading that section, and,
yes,
and he took over from Abba Kyari, actually. When Abba Kyari had that crisis and he was removed, he took over from him. When Abba Kyari was handling that section, many bandits, many kidnappers, let me put it there, many kidnappers were being tracked and arrested. And I know at the point, Jonathan actually procured so many equipments to be used in tracking those who use telephone and also to commit crime. I think Jonathan procured this equipment. They were deployed across the country. But then we discovered that after Abba Kyari left that place, those systems were no longer being used. And now, if Abba Kyari used those systems to do a whole lot of work, arresting kidnappers, why is it that after he took over, we didn't see that much? If I were going to, ask him, if I were the National Assembly, ask him, that is what I would ask him. Yeah. Because if kidnappers are using telephones, to make calls,
they should be able to be tracked.
And funds are transferred. So this the equipment that ought to track these transactions and these discussions, you were heading that unit. So what happened to this equipment? And if those equipments were not working, what did you do to put them in order?
Right.
Because over these years, for those of us who have been unfortunate to have relations who have been kidnapped, it's very painful. And then you make calls, they call you, you call them, they shout on you, you shout on them, right. And then there's nobody is intervening. Right. So if the equipment was there, why under you was it not working?
All right.
That's the question I was asking.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Theophilus Abba, Programs Director, Daily Trust Foundation, for shedding more light on the headlines of our front pages this morning.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. All right, with that, we've come to the end of Daybreak right here on Trust TV. Thank you to all our callers, our guests as well, and our viewers. Make sure you tune in tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. so you don't miss out on engaging and interesting conversations right here on Daybreak. I am Hawa Ademikiawa. Thank you for watching.